Another animated series surfacing this season is Fish Police, based on Steve Moncuse's crazy comic. As I said, comics are booming, animation is hot again, and science fiction is bullish too. Some SF writers are on a real roll. James Morrow, he has a series called Bible Stories for Adults, including The Deluge and The Covenant. His novel Only Begotten Daughter was a finalist for the 1990 Nebulas, and Morrow's upcoming novel, Towing Jehovah, also has a religious theme. And lo, he spoke unto the angel in the sky thusly.
Towing Jehovah is a sequel to the Exxon Valdez environmental disaster. It's sort of the further adventures of Captain Hazelwood, or the character who was clearly Captain Hazelwood, sort of a Romana Clef, I guess. But the corpse of God turns up floating in the Atlantic Ocean. And the captain of this discredited, tainted supertanker is hired to tow the corpse of God, to tow Jehovah out of the sea lane so it will not be a menace to navigation anymore, and so it will freeze because the angels decide that it would be undignified for God's corpse to rot. And there's some minor hope that maybe God isn't brain dead, and so that'd be a further reason to bring cryonic technology to bear on this very large corpse. It's a 2-mile corpse, and a supertanker's the only ship in the world capable of this mission. So it's a chance for the captain to redeem himself. It's sort of Joseph Conrad's theme from Lord Jim of getting the second chance, and can you make good on another shot at redemption, or will you blow it again?
And instead of an oil spill, it's a God spill. How does Towing Jehovah expand on what you've done in the past? What new territory are you exploring?
What's new is in this novel, I get to make fun of atheists. Because if you think about it, finding God's corpse is bad news for everybody. Nobody's happy with this situation, including atheists, because this says that their worldview is invalid too, right? Because if God existed,
right,
then they've been kind of, you know, buying into a lie. That's different. I mean, this is, of course, a James Morrow novel, so, I mean, it will also not have a whole lot of use for organized religion either. I suppose the other thing that's different is I'm getting to maybe the opposite of the theme from my Covenant story. I'm suggesting that a world without God would become immoral. I mean, you always hear this argument from fundamentalists and so on that, like, well, if Darwinism is true, then we have no reason to behave morally, you know, and that's just that's just the path to hell if we decide to embrace evolution. That's the path to chaos and anarchy. So I figured I would give the devil his due and explore that notion, and maybe on the supertanker, a kind of microcosm emerges that this is the world without God, and the social order on the supertanker breaks down.
Oh. Hello, oops, end of tape. Was that you, Nancy? Oh. Well, speaking of, let's talk about cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is a subgenre of future SF where people plug directly into computers, living in a silicon dream world. Cyberpunk was all the rage 2 years ago. Now it's almost passé. Author Michael Swanwick was part of the cyberpunk brat pack, but at the Nebula Awards in April, he wanted to talk about his new novel, Stations of the Tide. My friend Control cornered him in his room.
I've just finished a novel called, which just came out, called Stations of the Tide, which is about sex, magic, and television. And that's very it's a very low concept. It would take a long. You couldn't sell it in Hollywood on a 5-minute lunch. It's set on a planet where once every couple of hundred years the ice caps melt and the continental shelf is drowned. All the animals and the plants native to the planet, of course, adapt to this, and they change from being land creatures to being sea creatures. The human beings, meanwhile, all have to pull up out of the tidewater, and they have a massive migration. You know, millions of people are on the move, and right into the middle of this, the hero, the bureaucrat, is sent down, and he has to track down and question and possibly arrest a suave, handsome, everything, that he's not black magician in the middle of all this. And a great deal happens. Everything changes in the course of the novel.
The seer of cyberpunk is Vancouver writer William Gibson. His trilogy Neuromancer, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive defines cyberpunk. Because of his books, Bill was invited to try out the latest computer graphics technology, a Model T version of the gadgetry he imagines in his novels. It's called virtual reality. 3D sense-around TV, and it's interactive. Take a walk down computer memory lane, fly over distant planets, or slide down a molecule of DNA. Gibson worked what he saw into an upcoming novel, Virtual Light.
Virtual Light is, the idea I have with that is I want to do a near future SF novel. I'm not going to say exactly when it is, but I want to do one of those kind of 90 minutes into the future things and have a world that is more recognizably our world, where there are countries and wars and politicians and all of that, but where virtual... I want to write about a world in which virtual reality technology has been realized to some extent. And I'll be extrapolating from the virtual reality technology that we have now. I don't think the book's actually about virtual reality technology. If you want to see the piece that's sort of triggered this book, there'll be a story of mine coming out in Omni eventually called Skinner's Room, which was originally, it was commissioned by the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art for an architecture show last year. And it was, so far it's only been published in the catalog of an exhibit called Visionary San Francisco, but that's the story that sort of triggered the book.
By the by, Gibson's novel Neuromancer has been optioned by Hollywood, which means someone has the rights to turn it into a movie. That doesn't mean they will. People in LA will option a dessert menu. Anyway, here's hoping we see cyberpunk at the Cineplex. Another great novel that's been optioned is Dan Simmons' Hyperion. Memorable characters caught up in a looming interstellar war. Dan writes wonderfully in SF, horror, fantasy, and mainstream fiction. I wonder if he's ever thought of trying a screenplay. Dan, it's Commander Rick. Your books are very visual. Have you ever considered writing for the silver screen?
Yes, I've even collaborated with Edward Bryant on doing a treatment for Care and Comfort, my largest novel. And as with so many children of this part of the 20th century, I'm all ready to run out and do a screenplay. Of course, I'm so old, as you know. Anybody who's over 40 can't do a screenplay. But it is difficult. And I've done 2 little TV episodes, adapted 2 of my stories to half-hour Monsters episodes. So I know within a limited budget how much fun it is to find a cinematic or at least a television equivalent of a literary or at least a written piece. It's very hard turning a large novel into a 2-hour theatrical release. But I'm determined at some point I'm going to do it. Filmmaking was an old love of mine. It actually got me into teaching back in the late 60s. I was working with a professional filmmaker helping inner city kids make movies. And so I backed into education through filmmaking, and I'd like to come full circle and have the experience again.
While I've got you on the line, you and Ed Bryant have co-authored an upcoming SF mystery. What can you tell me about it?
Current title is The Reichenbach Attractor, which sounds pulpy, which is the idea.
Sounds like fractals and chaos theory.
Actually, there are fractals and chaos mathematics enter into it. We haven't figured out how, but definitely it enters into it. That's my current passion, is chaos math. This is a closed-door mystery set on a starship. Only one person awake, all the others in cold sleep, and a computer can prove it. And yet that person who's awake is murdered. And in order to solve the mystery, they awaken a recreational program of Sherlock Holmes. But the program is so well designed that the Sherlock in it in 1897 has decided that he's a fictional character, and he's busy having his nervous breakdown back in 1897.